"That was probably the worst presentations I've ever seen in my entire life," exclaimed the manager. I still remember that scene, which happened a couple of years ago at our workplace. But basically, a manager yelled at a brand new employee who was underperforming, and he did that just in front of everyone. So my question to you is, do you think that this manager, this boss, could have handled this situation better? If you said yes, then I think so. And this is why I would like to introduce to you to a very important notion in leadership that we call emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? How can a lack of emotional intelligence get in the way of your leadership journey? And especially, how can you use that as a tool to get better as a leader? So by definition, emotional intelligence is your ability to understand your own emotions, to manage them so that you don't really overreact, but respond to those kind of situations, those challenging situations, in the most appropriate way. Obviously, the manager that I mentioned before lacked emotional intelligence. Instead of trying to understand why Johnny or the brand new employee behaved that way, he just made a public criticism like this. And he failed also to apply one of the most fundamental rules in leadership, which is to praise publicly and to criticize in private, or to make any feedback in private. I must say that I also had a similar experience a couple of years ago as the president of the first Toastmasters Club of Madagascar for this year. I remember back then, a couple of years ago, I was still Vice President of Education, and at that time, we were really looking forward to having a great meeting, a wonderful meeting. We just bought new badges, new materials, brand new badges. We just printed everything in color, especially the agenda. And I was especially looking forward for a great meeting. But then, just the night before our session, a member texted me on Facebook and he said, "I will not come tomorrow, I will cancel my speech." So immediately I replied to him, "Why are you doing this to us? Why are you behaving like this? Like, we're really trying to be serious here at Toastmasters. So why are you canceling your speech right now? And why are you telling me this only now after we printed everything?" And I totally lacked emotional intelligence as well, just like the manager that I mentioned. And that is why we need, as leaders, to manage our emotions and to understand emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, once again, is your ability to understand your own emotions so that you respond in challenging situations in the most appropriate way. There are many components of emotional intelligence, but I will just stick to two of them for the sake of this presentation, and these are self-regulation and empathy. Self-regulation implies that you become more and more aware of your own emotions and try to manage them. Concretely, how do you do that? You identify certain triggers that would make you behave in a certain way. For instance, I now know that anybody at Toastmasters can cancel a speech at any time, so I would not have to overreact to the situation. That is a trigger, and I know how to respond that and behave in the most appropriate way. The second component of emotional intelligence is empathy. Empathy implies putting yourself into someone else's shoes, really trying to understand why they behave in the way they do, and in the end, practice active listening. But one of the most concrete actions you can take today, starting from today, is a parable that I really like from Dale Carnegie's book, and this is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Don't judge the book by the title, by the way. It's one of the most powerful books ever written on human relationships that has changed millions of lives until now. But basically, in his book, he said, if you want to gather honey, do not kick over the beehive. So what does that expression mean? If you want to gather honey, do not kick over the beehive. Let's say that you are really fond of raw honey, so you decided to go to the forest and to gather some, but in the middle of the action, a tiny little bee just stings you in the palm of your hand, and you overreact to that situation. So you kick over the beehive, and immediately a swarm of bees will get out of their house, out of the beehive, and then will get after you and then will sting you to death. It was you in the first place who created that situation. And this is to say, if somebody challenges you at your workplace, for example, it's up to you not to make the situation worse. Just like the person who gathered some honey. And I think that is really important, and that is why we need to become more and more aware of our emotions first, and then try to self-regulate ourselves, or apply this notion of self-regulation in emotional intelligence, and finally respond to the situation in the most appropriate way. But one of the things that I remember from that book as well is to never criticize people, but because when you criticize somebody, he will become very defensive. He would not even listen to what you say, and that would create some anger, bitterness, frustration, and certainly demotivation if you're leading people. So if there is one thing that I would like you to remember today, it's that parable from Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that is to say, if you want to gather honey, do not kick over the beehive. Until next time.